Unit 7, Lesson 1 for our first lesson on our exponent unit. So let's just work through screens 1 through 6, and then the 7 through 14 is for your asynchronous work, so you want to make sure that you get that done. All right, so here it says recall the x to the 6 times x to the third. What does that really mean? So x to the 6 just means x times x times x times x, right? It means x times itself 6 times. And x to the third really means x times itself 3 times. So then count up the number of x's here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So see how we get x to the ninth? So how can we avoid having to do this every time, right? So what do we do when we're multiplying monomials, meaning one term with the same base? We add the exponents, right? So if we learn that, now we can use that, and that's called the product rule, okay? So what does that mean? In general, when the multiply numbers of variables of the same base, you want to add the exponents. So let's just run through these couple examples here. So for instance, x to the m times x to the n equals x to the m plus n, right? The base is staying the same, you add the exponents. Okay, so here's number 1, right? A to the 12th, A to the 15th. So it's still going to stay as an A. And now we're going to do 12 plus 15. Well, 12 plus 15 gives me 27. And that's it. I get A to the 27th. All right, let's look at number 2. So I have B to the negative third and B to the 20th. So it's going to stay B. Again, we're adding this, but this is a negative 3, right? So it's like negative 3 plus 20, which is the same as 20 minus 3. So that's going to give us 17. All right, and then for number 3, we just need to do this for both C and D. And then we got to be careful here. Remember for this C, if we don't see an exponent here, it's an implied 1. So this is really like 4 plus 1. So that's C to the 5th. And then D, 7, and D to the 3rd gives us D to the 10th. Remember, these are different variables, so you basically treat them like separate situations. Okay, so that's our first rule, the product rule. When you are asked to multiply the exponents, you actually add them. Okay, so the next shortcut is called the zero exponent rule. So any number raised to the 0 has a value of 1. So don't overthink it. It just means anything to the 0. B to the 0, 1. On number 2 here for this example, well, it's a to the negative third times a to the third. Remember, what were we asked to do when we were supposed to multiply with exponents from the last rule? We add them. So negative 3 and 3 gives me 0. But what's anything to the 0? 1. And then on number 3 here, you see this whole huge thing. It's all in parentheses to the 0, so it's just 1. Now, I do want to point one thing out. Make sure that you don't just put a 1 just because you see an x to the 0 or something to the 0 power. Remember, it's only what's to the 0 that's 1. So in this case, 4x to the 0. X to the 0 is 1, but the 4 is still there. So it'd be like 1 times 4, 4. Okay? All right. So recall the x to the third. So we've done 2 so far. We do our product rule. When you're asked to multiply the exponents, you actually add them. We do our 0 exponent. Anything to 0 is 1. And our last rule for this lesson is that we're going to work through what's called a power of a power, the power rule. So in this case, remember, x to the third to the 4th really means x to the third 4 times, which is x to the 12th. So how can we do this without having to do expansion? Well, what do you do with the 3 and the 4 when you're asked to do a power of a power? You multiply the exponents. Okay? All right, so let's see that in action. So here we go. Remember, x to the m to the n is like x to the m times n. So let's try that a couple times. So here you go. You see a to the 6th to the 4th. Well, 6 times 4 is 24. All right, well now we have b to the 2nd, c to the 7th, to the 3rd. So 2 times 3 is going to give me b to the 6th. 7 times 3 is going to give me 21. And then lastly for our examples here, number 3, we see 3 to the 2nd. You got to do each of these on their own. So this is 3, this is an exponent, right? That's just an integer. That's a coefficient. So 3 to the 2nd, or 3 squared. 3 squared is 9. Remember, this is like d to the 1st power here. Remember, if you do not see an exponent, it's implied to be a 1. So this is 1 times 2. So you can get d to the 2nd, and then 4 times 2, e to the 8th. So that's a tricky one. You have to just be careful with each of the terms on their own independently. Alright, so there you go. So let's look at a summary screen to finish. So we did the multiplication rule. When you're asked to multiply with exponents, you actually add them. We did the power of a power rule. When you take an exponent to an exponent, you multiply, and anything to the 0 is 1. Those are our rules for today. Make sure you do screens 7 through 14 for the asynchronous work, and check back later for my feedback. Hopes it helps.